Well, this did make me chuckle because we usually refer to the king as King Cosy Socks, don't we, when he's in Scotland and he's donning his tartan kilts and those wonderfully cosy socks that we love to see him in. Well, it looks like there's a new nickname for the king, and that will be King Holey Socks or King Threadbare Socks, because I'm not talking about the sacred kind of holy, but it seems that King Charles, and that mend and make do attitude of his that is so royal, could do with a little bit of darning behind the scenes, perhaps. We got a glimpse of his royal but raggedy feet when he took his shoes off during a visit to the mosque at Brick Lane, and we'll be seeing more of that later. Harry hinted in his tome that everybody hates Angela Kelly. Apart from the dead Queen, everybody apparently hates Angela Kelly for being such a bossy bridge as well. At least threadbare socks wouldn't have happened under her watch, would they? Or threadbare tights in regards to the late Queen? Heaven forbid! Heaven to Betsy. Can you imagine it doing a Nora Batty? But we will return to more royal matters. Actually, we will return to more royal matters lately. But that slip of the tongue points to a royal ratter. And that royal ratter not only looks shrewish, but behaves in a shrewish, verminous kind of style. Can you guess who I'm talking about? Has Harkle. Yes. And the matter, this dingy business of the encounter, the liaison that took place behind a pub in a field, which isn't royal behaviour. And don't get me wrong, my dear, I've known a few fields in my time. I'm sure a few of you had too, my dear. I ain't too pure to be pink. I've known a few fields. I've had a few rolls in the hay. And so I am in no way prudish about this kind of thing. I'm not in any way prudish about anybody revealing this sort of encounter in their memoir at all, you know. Harry's received quite a lot of criticism for some of the more crude passages, saucy passages within that tome. And in normal circumstances, I would encourage them. I'd love them, you know. But this sort of Irvine Welsh affair doesn't belong under the penmanship of a royal, you know. This is my whole problem with it. It's an abnegation of his royal responsibility. Not that he didn't abnegate it years ago now. But this is really relinquishing any sort of dignity, any sort of grace by uncovering these encounters, these liaisons, these little anecdotes, which might be worthy of raising a chuckle or the arching of an eyebrow or the fondness of similar memories. But as any other royal in history will tell you, my dear, and many of them certainly weren't perfect, as many of them will tell you, do what you will, my dear, be as sordid as you like. You know, most of these royals existed in the days before mass media, social media, where whispers couldn't be shared in the way they are these days. But the philosophy was always, be as sordid as you like, do what you will, but A, don't get caught, and B, don't write public memoirs describing these encounters for your own benefit and your own merching opportunities. It's absolutely disgraceful. This gal, this Sasha Walpole, this woman who had the ignominy and the misfortune of taking Harold's flower, she kept this secret, this miserable secret, not because of the encounter, but because it was him. She kept this secret for 21 years. 21 years. But she said the phone started pinging when this tome was published. The phone started pinging and her world got smaller. Gossip was rife as everybody started joking about this romp that she kept to her heart and her chest. Have you seen this interview with this Sasha Fierce character, this Sasha Walpole? Did you see the interview? What an absolute sterling piece of work she is, isn't she? Sterling, best of British, absolute best of British. Humble girl, loyal, dignified, until she was pushed to the limits by this pusillanimous prince. And by the way, Harry calls her an older woman. And everybody, you know, they started reading off Liz Hurley, all these rumours. Rupert Everett coming out with his version of events. I know who it was, says Rupert Everett. I know who the woman was, who Harry lost his V to. Well, you want to have a word with Sasha Walpole about that, Rupert Everett. It doesn't seem that you're privy to every encounter that the prince has had. every notch on his bedpost or haystack. Inglorious, Harry called it. Inglorious. Can you imagine this poor gal who's kept her trap shut for 21 years? 21 years a slave to the truth. And this episode is described as inglorious. Harry knows how the press operate. He should have had every clue that this girl would have been tracked down and hounded, because people in circles knew about this encounter, knew who they were talking about. And as Sasha Walpole has made very clear, she had no choice but to come forth and sort of do this confessional for the world. She really had very little choice in the matter, because the press attention was getting overwhelming, all the gossip and the whispers, and she had to seize her narrative. And it seems that she is everything that Meghan is not. No opportunism within her psyche. And by the way, good for her. I hope that because she has been forced to deal her hand and show her hand, I truly hope that she has been remunerated royally. I hope she's made an absolute killing and taken good advice and made as much as she can, because she could have done all it would have taken. You know, she was sitting on a huge story that for all these years could have earned her mega bucks. Never crossed her mind. No mercenary plan from this Sasha Walpole. You know, and a few of us find ourselves in these positions. And I absolutely understand the position that this gal was in. I understand that she didn't have the sort of love of mammon that's needed for somebody to betray and cheapen themselves and an encounter via financial lucrative invitations, because I could pick up the telephone right now and within 10 minutes have struck a deal worth 6 figures. Yes, because I know exactly what it's like to take on lovers with a public profile, and I'm talking about public profiles of enormity. And there ain't enough space on iCloud, there ain't enough storage on there to squirrel away all the information that's in my little black book, my dear. But not even in my brokest hour, not even a time in my life where I was working 3 different jobs and then spent a year trying to find employment after redundancy, not even in those darkest moments of destitution, not even in those darkest moments, my dear, did it cross my mind to pick up that telephone and make that call to various agents, deal brokers, and this, that, and the fourth, that would have solved my problems overnight, my dear. Oh, overnight. Because I was sitting on a gold mine. I'm still sitting on a gold mine. And it's a fine gold mine, my dear, but no one's going to mine my gold without my say-so, my dear. And no one's going to mine my gold at the detriment to anybody else. So I know how to keep stum. Sasha Walpole knows how to keep stum. It's the Harkles that seem to lack that ability. And it doesn't behoove them. And it doesn't reflect well on them. But the whole episode reflects absolutely glitteringly upon Sasha Walpole, who would have made a fine Duchess of Sussex, wouldn't she? Duchess Sasha. Harry exposed this girl. Fed her to the wolves, as Meghan would say. They fed me to the wolves. What about Sasha Walpole, Harry? What about Sasha Walpole? And I am deadly serious when I tell you that I could pick up a telephone right now and receive a windfall overnight to the tune of 6 figures for one story, reaching into the 7 figures if I were to divulge all the information I know, reveal the lovers I've had, who most of them now are married with children, happily married with children. I'm not one that messes about with married men, not intentionally anyway. And this girl speaks so well of him, still speaks so well of him. She'd love to meet up with him for a drink. She's got no hard feelings against him, thinks he's great, he's so humble, he was wonderful, he was down to earth, He was like one of the gang. In fact, we hear that he led a very normal life in some ways. This sort of life where he was able to compartmentalise his royal role and living that life, and then able to exist with a rather normal sense of well-being outside of the confines of whichever palace he was living in at the time. Do you see? He had this very normal sort of life with normal sort of people. Could be Harry, so I don't know what this gilded cage that he was so terrified of being imprisoned within. I don't know what sort of charm it had over him. But this poor girl, that was the last time they hung out. The romp in the field. He didn't contact her after that. It was all done. It was all said and done. She'd slept with a friend. Maybe he was embarrassed, but not the sign of a gentleman, is it? Come on, let's nip out for a fag and a romp in the bushes and then discard and never see again. Well, she never had a problem with that because she's a lady and she thinks the best of Harry, but others of us might find it a bit cheap. And that is the inglorious thing. The inglorious thing is not the romp in the field. That sounds like, a wonderful bit of jolly fun. As I say, one isn't a prude. I lost my virginity, as I've told you before, in the ladies' toilets at the bungalow in Santa Monica with an Eskimo. But, we all have these encounters, dear, and I've got more than most. These tales, I should say. And most of them are a lot of fun, whether they're tipsy or not. But, that's not the inglorious scheme of the whole affair. The ingloriousness is Harry's behaviour and the way that he shouted it to the rooftops like no gentleman that I know, my dear. An officer and a gentleman? Well, maybe an officer. You can just scrape into that category, maybe. But a gentleman? Don't make me laugh, my dear. And there is one matter that I'm going to reject as part of Sasha Walpole's testimony, and that is the fact that he had a peachy bum, so she says, because she confirms that she slapped him with some jollity on the buttocks after their liaison, after their romp. She says, well, he had a peachy bum, he was young. And I'm going to reject that claim, even though I wasn't there, because he doesn't have a peachy bum. I'm sorry. No. The boy's too scrawny. He doesn't have a peachy bum. No, I've seen a lot of bums. I've known a lot of buttocks, and that doesn't fall into the peachy category. Maybe two small apricots on the shriveled but hard side. But peachy? No, my dear. If that's the domain of anybody, a fleshy, maybe gently fuzzy peach of some sort, that would fall onto William's terrain. William's terrain maybe could get away with more of a peach in the description, but no, I'm not letting Harry get away with that. Maybe some, a couple of ruddy apples that fell from the tree in the orchard. 2 bad apples, maybe. But we've all seen them splashed over the front cover of newspapers in another of Harry's wonderful escapades. So we've seen evidence, my dear, and I'm not suggesting there's anything wildly wrong with them, but let's not call dried apricots a peach. He's brought this to me, she says, and I have to say it in my words. Otherwise, it's going to get twisted. King Charles welcomed Mr. Zelensky to Buckingham Palace following on from his speech to Parliament, and later on he took a cup of tea with the Prime Minister at number 10. He praised the King's support for Ukraine, and before the meeting he said, "It'll be a truly special moment for me, for our country, and in particular because I will convey to the King from all the Ukrainians the words of gratitude for the support His Majesty showed to them when he was still the Prince of Wales." What did you think of the new images released by Royal Mail featuring the King? They're using the same effigy that's being featured on coins with King Charles. And it was in 1840 that this tradition commenced with the world's first adhesive stamp, which was, of course, the penny black. The first adhesive postage stamp featured a portrait of Victoria. And these stamps will be available from the 4th of April. Many people have asked why the King isn't wearing a crown. We're so used to seeing the late Queen's image with her head adorned. Actually, that wasn't a crown, that was a diadem that she wore for that portrait. But yes, we are used to seeing that. However, when it comes to kings, it's not unusual for there not to be a crown adorning the head. Although usually there is a crown featured somewhere in the design, sort of hovering above the head, incorporated into the design somewhere. And I must admit, initially I was rather disappointed not to have a crown in there. Actually, I'm still disappointed. I've just got to say it. I think there should be a crown in there somewhere. But it's slowly growing on me, the simplicity that is emblematic of Charles's style. He likes simplicity in design. It seems rather obvious now that he wants to project a more human face of the monarchy, literally. And I have come to find that there is a quiet beauty to this image, and it's rather serene, although it is spoilt by this modern insistence on the scan code or whatever it's called. I'm not technological, my dear, but the scan thing at the side. I don't like that. And also, I think one of the reasons why I would have liked to see something on the king's head is the fact that it's a lot of ear, isn't it? At least with the Queen, there was something to distract, the higher hair and the diadem to distract from the view of the ear, because that's all I saw to begin with. It was like, that ear. And I know that he took some mocking, especially some decades ago, for having rather large ears. And yes, I think when he was a very young man, they were more apparent. But I have to say, I never think of him as someone who has outlandishly oversized ears at all. I think his extremities rather suit him. But from the side, obviously, all one sees is the ear. You start begging for a little distraction and trying to sort of look around it. But here it is. And naturally, this week, thoughts go out to all our Turkish fruits, our Turkish delights within the fruit basket here at the River Broadcast, because I know many of you in Turkey tune in to watch this show, and I don't have the words. I don't really have the words. All I can do is offer my prayers for the absolute devastation that we've seen due to the earthquakes. It's just so heartrending. I actually can't. I haven't got the words for it, so I will use the King's words, who said, "Our thoughts and special prayers are with everyone who has been affected by this appalling natural disaster, whether through injury or the destruction of their property, and also with the emergency services and those assisting the rescue efforts." Heartbreaking and quite unimaginable. Princess Catherine has been taking the bull by the horns and flinging herself into activity over the past week. She's hired a lady with a ball-breaking reputation, Alison Caulfield, who's a former air stewardess, and it's said that she's likely to run rings around the courtiers at Buckingham Palace. A breath of fresh air, she's said to be. She will shake things up. She is, this source told the Sunday Times, loud, tons of fun, full of energy and enthusiasm. Oh, she sounds like a nightmare, doesn't she? Yeah, she's one of them, doesn't she? Not all of us like the sound of that, but, we'll give her the benefit of the doubt. Tons of fun, loud, and she's gonna... she's usually... That type's usually the one you cringe at when they suddenly come into the fold. We're going to shake things up around here. Oh, great, can't wait. Jesus Christ. But she's a brand management expert, and she's been hired as this new private secretary, and I expect she's somewhat responsible for some of the sort of dynamism and enthusiasm, more vocal activity that's been coming from Catherine over the last week. Wanting to be less timid and more bold. Now, I must admit, I am torn with this because, to be quite honest with you, for my taste, I prefer Princess Catherine as a silent movie star. Yes, we get to hear her talk here and there. But I like her to talk with her imagery, with the portraits that she paints, with her own beauty, her grace. She speaks volumes by saying nothing, as Kate Moss did early in her career. And before to YouTube, of course, you can hear her talk and her speak now. But for decades, Kate Moss was successful as a silent movie star in the most exquisite way that was widely admired. And I see Catherine as largely that, although not totally silent. So I think it's an uneasy path for me to watch her tread. I understand that it's a mantle she may just have to take on in this modern age while she is promoting her early years foundation and trying to prove to the wider world that the royals are great value for money. She doesn't need to prove that to me, but a lot of the world seem to want more proof of that. And it's all this throwing daylight upon magic that I worry about. Harry has done so much of that and caused so much damage by throwing daylight upon magic, and I'm sure Catherine won't be spoiling things in the same way, not at all, and certainly not purposefully. But I do worry about the directions he's taking in some respects. I saw her around a table speaking to young children who were more interested in playing with their toys, to be honest, and she was telling them about, speaking about their feelings and about mental health. Everything's mental health, because it's fashionable at the moment, but she was telling them, remember to ask each other how you're feeling and blah, blah, blah. And you think, well, what's wrong with that, River? Are you really so cruel? Of course, we should all foster an atmosphere of respect and instill these things into our children, and concern and caring for others, but I don't know. I'm sorry. Asking young 6-year-olds, whatever, to ask each other how they're feeling. I remember, believe it or not, what it's like to be 6 years old to some degree. And the last thing that kids want to be doing at that age is asking each other how they feel. The whole world is turning into this episode of Oprah Winfrey. Are you okay? Are you not okay? They haven't asked me. Let's ask each other how we all feel. There are limits. Can't kids just be kids? So I don't really like seeing Catherine sort of playing into those hands. And if you can't get the nuance of what I'm saying, then rack off. Because there will be some out there that just don't have the brain power to understand that I'm not slating Catherine for giving children nurturing advice. It's more about the bigger picture of what society we are creating. Well, we're creating a kind of society, River, because we're asking everyone if they're okay and they're feeling good. I can't argue with stupid. Those of you who have some sort of savvy and some sort of nous and some sort of intellectual understanding will get what I'm talking about. We saw her in conversation with Roman Kemp regarding his mental difficulties over the last few years. We've seen a lot of her brother, James Middleton, in the press and on television, describing life with his dogs. He was very attached, especially to one of his dogs, the dog that introduced him to his future wife. In fact, very romantic story there. He seems rather a fragile soul, and he has also spoken about how his sisters, Pippa and Catherine, have always been very much a force for help and of good in his battles with mental difficulties and troubles, how they've always been there for him, and how they've even accompanied him to therapy. So Catherine certainly isn't this unfeeling, unsympathetic ice maiden that seems to have been painted. She has experience with these difficulties within her own family, where he was deeply troubled to the point of being, contemplating his own life. Genuinely. She looked exquisite in these stripes at St John's Church of England Primary School in Bethnal Green, and this was part of Children's Mental Health Week. Catherine also paid a visit to a college in Derby alongside Captain Preet Chandy, MBE, to celebrate the army officer's return from her solar expedition across Antarctica. Kate was patron of this expedition, which broke a ton of records, by the way, and she wore this white double-breasted blazer from Zara. Those Rapunzel tresses seemed to get longer and longer and longer, cascading away they were as she tried her hand at tyre pulling. Yorkie and Porkie spent a night on the razzle as they hit Mayfair and went to Private Members Club Lulu's. They stumbled out of there at 1 a.m. in the morning, but both looking rather fresh-faced, actually, rather lovely. B clutching a Gucci bag, which I thought was a little bit vulgar, but each to their own. And Fergie there, plush black cat pumps by Charlotte Olympia. She loves her novelty footwear, doesn't she? And I think they do look rather charming, those feline slippers. And she actually emerged the morning after from the scene of the crime, trying to distract from her night of sins in a red headband, black suede knee-highs, and houndstooth. And Beatrice actually also visited Queen Mary University in her role as the new patron of the British Skin Foundation, and she toured a research lab at the Centre for Cell Biology and Cutaneous Research, And as well as that white laboratory coat, she accessorised with those haunting eyes of hers that she inherited from Empress Victoria. Haunting. The king opened a new learning hub at the University of East London, where he was met with cheers, stepping out of his Rolls Royce. Actually, one of the students there in the crowd, some tyke, yelled out, "Please bring back Harry." "No, thank you. Speak for yourself, and don't speak to our king that way." I'm so fed up with the crowds with this new culture of heckling the king and queen consort. It's absolutely vulgar, and we all know who's really responsible for it. The Harkles. Anyway, actually, you know, that Rolls Royce of the king's, it always puts me in mind of an uncle figure of mine. We used to call him Uncle Ray. He wasn't actually an uncle, but Uncle Ray, and he was a vastly wealthy tycoon, and he always used to come round on our house on a Sunday morning before we'd have Sunday lunch. And the reason I mentioned it, because it was a bright blue Rolls Royce that he had. Sort of turquoise, maybe a bit brighter. Bright blue it was. You know, a real scene stealer, which brings back happy memories. I've never seen one that colour before. But anyway, I digress. Yes, he was heckled by the crowd, and he said to his aide, what are they saying? And then he sort of chuckled when he learned that it was about Harry, and said, "Oh, yes, haunted by the boy he is, haunted by that lad in his coronation year." It really sticks in my craw. Anyway, went on to enjoy his day at Brick Lane in the East End of London. Their Majesties had a lovely visit to Brick Lane, and they met local business owners and community leaders, especially revolving around the Bangladeshi community. And Camilla was an absolute dream in cream. She looked so queenly. And there were lots of Union Jacks to be seen, and many shouts of "God Save the King." And there's actually something gorgeously old-fashioned about those cries of "God Save the King," isn't there? And I never recall seeing many of them during the late Queen's reign, but I think it became fashionable, didn't it, during the funeral and the accession to the throne of King Charles, to hear it shouted over the last few months. And it's really rather lovely to hear it continuing in the crowds, because it has that old-fashioned feel, and I guess signals a new reign in particular. So it's nice to hear those cries in the air. Long may they continue throughout the coronation and beyond. Be very nice, wouldn't it? Lovely Edward, the Earl of Wessex, who seems to be vanishing under a puddle of clothes and is just going to be one baggy suit soon, was visiting schools in the past week, voluntary and community organisations running the Duke of Edinburgh Award in Blackpool, and he spent time with young volunteers in local communities. And there was a reception to celebrate British East and South East Asian communities at Buckingham Palace, where their Majesties were joined by the Princess Royal, the Earl of Wessex again, the Duke of Kent, the Duchess of Gloucester, who was exquisite in this pearl choker, I've got to say, and lovely Princess Alexandra. It was a glittering array of guests from all fields, and it was pure joy. Do you see the fabulous fashion? It really was a joyous event, and of course they even threw in lovely Alexa Chung. In her capacity as patron of Scottish Rugby Union and the Motor Neurone Disease Association, the Princess Royal officially started the 555-mile charity bike ride. She put on a gay display with blue and yellow tartan, which was so spring-like, paired with this green roll neck, chic lunettes and a huge brooch. The Prince of Wales did his royal duty at an investiture ceremony, doling out some of the Queen's birthday honours, and notable recipients included Bonnie Tyler, lovely Bonnie Tyler, who hails from Wales. Services to music, you know, you might recall her song Total Eclipse of the Heart, Holding Out for a Hero. Absolutely love Bonnie. And she looked very pleased to meet with William, isn't she gorgeous? And also actress Pauline Quirke, who is largely famous, well, for many acting roles, but in particular Birds of a Feather. Pauline Quirke there, looking quirky. And Stella McCartney became CBE for services to fashion and sustainability at Windsor Castle. This time invested was from the King himself, from Charles. You know, they're rather cosy. Stella's cosy with many of the royals, Charles and William. And I was noticing no gay colours. Everything was very funereal, lots of people wearing black lately, and I noticed this for a few weeks now during these ceremonies. I was like, where's all the gay colours? Silly me. I don't know why the penny didn't drop that, of course, these are the late Queen's birthday honours, so I'm presuming, and I haven't read this, but I'm presuming that it's out of respect to her that they're wearing black, which is a lovely gesture, isn't it? I mean, it went over my silly head, but yes, it seems that it's part of, it's an offering of respect in mourning, so I thought that was really lovely and really quite touching, if true. It was fun to catch up with you, my dears, and I look forward to having another gossip with you very soon. So thank you very much for dropping by. I truly appreciate it. Channel the royal spirit, and toodles. Pip pip!